Every one of the classic albums in this series is unique in one way or another. But the record we're about to hear is unique in almost every way. So unique, in fact, that it's unlikely there will ever be another one like it. The year is 1988, and our classic album is The Traveling Wilburys, Volume 1.
Being beat up and battered around, being sent up and I've been shut down. You're the best thing that I've ever found. Handle me with care.
Looking back with me for the next 60 minutes is Charlie T. Jr., Tom Petty, and the pair who produced the album, Nelson and Otis Wilbury, otherwise known as George Harrison and Jeff Lynne.
You know, what a thing to do. Roy Orbison's there strumming, there's Bob Dylan strumming, there's George Harrison strumming, and me and Tom strumming. And just coming up with the bits of tunes, and then whoever sort of comes up with the chord sequence, we sort of all go along with it. Oh, somebody's got a chord sequence going, let's play along with it, you know, and then add to it, you know, and make it go in different ways. And so it was a totally collaborative effort, you know.
It's hysterical, really. I mean, it was all done just purely from the fun value and the idea of just being optimistic about, you know, I mean, if we can't write these songs, there's no hope, really. I mean, sometimes you can get an amazing block, you know, being a writer or trying to write a song, and it's particularly in a situation where you've got all these sort of famous people who you sort of, you know, you're in awe of partially and afraid of the other half, you know. It's sort of like, ooh, you know, you're never quite sure what's going to happen. But, yeah, it's just amazing, really. It was a great experience.
Although hindsight has a way of making million-to-one chances look as though they were meant to be, the odds against George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan and Tom Petty joining forces might well have been longer. But it all started with George Harrison's 1987 album Cloud 9, which he co-produced with Jeff Lynne, a desperate move, or so it seemed at the time, to pick a man who'd spent the best part of the 70s reworking the sound of the Beatles' I Am the Walrus with ELO. But George didn't see it that way.
As the Beatles were influenced by a lot of other people, I'm sure Jeff was influenced by the Beatles and a lot of other people too. I think particularly because at the end of the 60s, when we were doing the Walrus kind of things with the cellos and stuff, and that ELO had that cello very prominently. But I've listened recently, or before I got to know Jeff, I listened to a lot of ELO stuff. And he's a great writer. I think Jeff Lynne's a brilliant songwriter. He knows all the little bits from everything, not just Beatles. And he's a great arranger too, and he's got a great ear for just for sound.
I got my mind set on you. I got my mind set on you. I got my mind set on you. Got my mind set on you. But it's gonna take money, a whole lot of spending money. It's gonna take plenty of money to do it right, child. It's gonna take time, whole lot of precious time. It's gonna take patience and time to do it, 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 to do it right, child. I got my mind set on you. I got my mind set on you. I got my mind set on you. I got my mind set on you.
I hadn't done anything like for a couple of years. I'd sort of didn't know what to do, you know. I hadn't got any idea what I was going to do. And George said, would you like to produce my album with me? And I said, no thanks, I'm busy. No, I said, of course I would, I'd love to, you know. It's the best, one of the best things I could wish to do right now. Especially being as it's George, because I love his stuff. And so we finished that album, and then suddenly I started getting all these millions of requests, because it was so popular, George's album, luckily, that I got loads of requests to do other people, you know, and I had to start turning loads of them down and stuff, you know, which was different from not doing anything the year before, you know.
It was Jeff Lynne who made contact with Roy Orbison and Tom Petty.
When we started my album, we got almost to the end of it, And those guys were around. We were all just slowly becoming a circle of friends. Roy came in and we stopped in the middle of mine and we did a couple of tracks for Roy. We were all doing these tracks, and Mike Campbell, who's the Heartbreakers guitarist, well, we were all out in his garage doing these tracks. Just took over his household, really. So we did that. We did a couple of Roys, and then Roy would, stay around and sing when we did a track of mine, and we did a Randy Newman track there. And of course George started coming around. And right about near the end was when the Wilburys started up suddenly, accidentally.
The way the actual record came about was that I had to do this song because Warner's needed this third song to put on one of them 12-inch singles. So I didn't have a song, I didn't have an extended version, I didn't have another song, so I just said to Jeff, I was in Los Angeles and he was producing Roy Orbison, and we were having dinner one night, and I said, I'm going to have to write a song tomorrow and just do it, I was just thinking of like instant karma, that way. And I said, we're just going to do it tomorrow. And he said, where could we get a studio? And he said, well, maybe Bob, because he's got this little studio in his garage. And it was that instant, we just went back to his house, phoned up Bob. He said, sure, come on over. Tom Petty had my guitar, and he said, when I went to pick it up, he said, I was wondering what I was going to do tomorrow. And Roy said, well, give us a call tomorrow if you're going to do anything. I'd love to come along. And that was it. We started and wrote this tune the next morning when we got to Dylan's house. Just the tune. And then as we were doing that, I thought, let's just stick a bit in here for Roy, Roy could sing something.
Yeah, it was great. Just on the lawn in Bob Dylan's back garden, all strumming away, and said, let's get a bit for Roy. What a thing. And then Roy tries it out, and it's great, it's perfect for him. And it all came together like that, because everybody was there who wrote the song.
I was thinking, it's a bit daft having all these people stand around and then I end up singing it again. Just get them to sing it. And then when they actually were doing the vocals, and at one point, and I just said to Jeff, hey Jeff, this is it, the Traveling Wilburys.
And battered around, been sent up and I've been shut down. You're the best thing that I've ever found. Handle me with care. Reputation's changeable, situation's tolerable, but baby you're adorable. I'm so tired of being lonely. I still have some love to give. Won't you show me that you really care? Everybody's got somebody to lean on. Put your body next to mine and dream on. I've been fucked up and I've been fooled. I've been robbed and ridiculed in daycare centers and night schools. Handle me with care. Terrorized, sent to meetings, hypnotized, overexposed, commercialized. Handle me with care. I'm so tired of being lonely. I still have some love to give. Won't you show me that you really care? Everybody got somebody to lean on. Put your body next to mine.
Care, the opening track on our classic album, Travelling Wilburys, Volume 1.
There's a good little story on Handle with Care, because we got the tune, and we put it down, all the rhythm guitars, just with a click track. And then we needed the words, and I was walking around with a bit of paper and a pencil, and I was looking around like Dylan's garage for, looking at lists of his song titles, The Gates of Freedom, trying to think of a title. And I was saying, come on, where's the words? Thinking all these people are so great songwriters. Give us some lyrics then. And there was Bob saying, well, what's it about? What's it called? And I'm trying to come up with some titles. And I looked behind his garage door, and there was this big cardboard box that said Handle with Care on it. I said, it's called Handle with Care. And he, oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that. And that was it. Once we got the title, it just went off, I just thought, being beat up, battered around. And then the lyrics just were flying around there. I mean, we could have had 29 verses to that tune. It was brilliant. And the second one, which was this one called Dirty World, I mean, literally, it was just, because Bob's very funny. I mean, a lot of people take him seriously and that. But, if you know Dylan and his songs, he's such a joker, really. And he just sat down and he said, well, okay, what are we going to do? And Bob says, let's do one like Prince. And he just started banging away, love your sexy body, ooh, baby. And it just turned, like, into that tune.
It was nothing like Prince, really,
like
but
Prince, nothing like him. But I mean, that track, I love that track. It's just so funny, really.
He loves your sexy body. He loves your dirty mind. He loves when you hold him, grab him from behind. Oh, baby, you're such a pretty thing. I can't wait to introduce you to the other members of my gang. You don't need no wax job. You're smooth enough for me. If you need your oil change, I'll do it for you free. Oh, baby, the pleasure be all mine. If you let me drive your pickup truck and park it where the sun don't shine. Every time he touches you, his hair stands up on end. As your legs begin to quiver and his mind begins to bend. Oh, baby, you're such a tasty treat. But I'm under doctor's orders, I'm afraid to overeat. He loves your sense of humor, disposition too. There's absolutely nothing that he don't love about you. Oh, baby, I'm on my hands and knees. Life would be so simple if I only had a you to please. Oh, baby, turn around and say goodbye. You go to the airport now, and I'm going home and cry. He loves your electric dumplings. He loves your red bell peppers. He loves your fuel injection. He loves your service job. He loves your 5-speed gearbox. He loves your long endurance. He loves your quest for junk food. He loves your big refrigerator. He loves your trembling Wilbury. He loves your marble earrings. He loves your bucket curtains. He loves your power steering. He loves your bottled water. He loves your parts and service.
We decided to do this thing about he loves your, and then we wrote lists of, I mean, even that was funny. I mean, I don't know how other people write songs, but that bit, I just picked up a bunch of magazines and gave everybody a magazine, like Roy Orbison had Vogue magazine or something, And I had some copies of Autosport, which I gave to Bob Dylan. And they just started reading out little things like 5-speed gearbox and stuff like that, and just wrote down a big list of things. And then we reduced it down to about 12, ones that sounded interesting. We just wrote this random list and had it on the microphone. And then we just did the take. And whoever sang first sang the first one. And we just sang round, the group until we'd done them all.
And every time it came round to Roy Orbison, he always got the trembling Wilbury. And it was the funniest thing. Roy, the big voice, the big operatic, trembling Wilbury. And we all just collapsed every time. And no matter how we rearranged it, he always ended up with trembling Wilbury on the end.
Yeah.
Why trembling Wilburys?
It was trembling Wilburys at one point. Me and George were doing George's album Cloud 9. And we had this sort of fictitious sort of group that we might have one day called the Trembling Wilburys. It's just like you do in the studio, about 4 o'clock in the morning. And little did we know, it would be the Travelling Wilburys.
Yeah, well, you were saying about that guitar pick, because somebody was making these picks and they said, what should I put on them? Everybody has some smart little thing written on the pick. So as we'd just been talking about this Trembling Wilburys, I had Travelling Wilburys misspelled on this guitar pick, which is the one I gave you a year ago. But at that point, it was just a drunken thought in the back of the head.
So now you know. The next track on our classic album has Jeff Lynne on lead vocals. Is that a clue as to who came up with the song, or was Rattled another group collaboration, as the credits insist all the songs were?
Yeah, well, we all wrote it, but I because I hadn't got a song yet. This was about the 4th or 5th one we did, and I thought, I better sing one, otherwise, nobody will know I'm in it. And anyway, I sung it, nobody knew I was singing it. Anyway, so it didn't matter. The singing style is like that sort of rock and roll voice that I do sometimes on other records. But
It's like Sun Records to me, that track. The combination, the sound of it, I think, is just so close to a good old rock and roll thing from like the late 50s. But that partially is, I think, the guitars, acoustics, and the refrigerator. Yeah, the fridge. I tell you, it's the great new sound, folks. It's happening.
You know, there's no sort of virtuoso solos and all that, you know, nobody's trying to prove anything, like you say. And it is when, the thing I like is the harmony parts as well. You know, we all sing harmony around the mic all at once, which is real good. We double-tracked a couple of them. Some of us did. and you know, it's one of them, it's like done, and that's it, just record it. Okay, that's that one done. You know, it was really like that. And it wasn't all that, you know, tweaking it and farting about with it for hours on end, which I usually do. You know, I didn't get a chance. It was out before I had a chance to mess about with it. It was
I mean, I think that's the great thing, because, you know, Jeff's always made, we've all made our own records in particular ways, and you get into a habit or a routine of doing your songs in one way. And I think when we did Cloud9 last year, I think the way I saw it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for, you know, Jeff, we did certain things in the way which he mightn't have done in the past, his ELO records or his own. And in that way, it gave him a way of getting out of a certain rut, say. And yeah, and the same thing with this, like the whole point of it. It's got to be a bit raggedy, because we just written them and done them. Because these songs, we, like, as I say, we'd write one tune and we'd walk up the garden, because we were in this friend's house and he had a little tiny studio. But it wasn't a studio, it was more like just a control room with a vocal booth. So we didn't have any space to play the guitars. So we set up in his the studio had a kitchen. It wasn't soundproofed or anything. And we just put like 5 chairs around the kitchen, screws them all in and put the microphones up, and that's it. So all them guitar parts, you know, all them acoustic guitars were just in this kitchen, and like the drummer on Rattled, he's playing on the refrigerator. He was with these funny little sticks, and you know, it had to be a bit rough, but that was the fun about it. I mean, we wanted the record to sound good, like a proper record, and not to sound like, you know, those other albums that famous people make where they phone in their parts. You know, we wanted it to be like a proper group, but at the same time to have a bit of a rough edge, and it gave us all, you know, a way. Maybe it's like safety in numbers. You can like hide behind each other a little bit.
She was there at the bar, she heard my guitar. She was long and tall, she was the queen of them all. Last night, thinking about last night. Last night, thinking about last night. She was dark and discreet, she was light on her feet. We went up to her room, and she lowered the boom. Last night, thinking about last night. Last night, thinking about last night. Down below, they danced and sang in the street. While up above the wall,
featuring Lefty and Charlie T. Jr., Roy Orbison and Tom Petty.
Boy, Roy, he just, I'm so honored to have known Roy, really, you know, and because I loved him so much. He's such a lovely fella, you know. He has this image of the, you know, dark and lonely, but he never seemed that way to me. He seemed like a very happy person and just full of life and really living every day, and loved the Wilburys, you know. I remember Roy's laugh the most, I think, you know, that he had this beautiful laugh, kind of like, and I just remember in the control room, like, you know, because the Wilburys got pretty zany, and he went right along, you know, he was right there, he was right on top of it.
Roy's real showcase on the record was Not Alone Anymore, which presented particular problems for the Wilburys production team.
That's one of the hardest things, is to try and make it like a Roy Orbison record, because he has got like the best voice ever in pop music, I would think. And so if you can't get in the way of him either, you know, so it's a real tricky one to balance him and get him his voice. His voice is really big anyway, but obviously you don't want a weirdy little backing, but it's really hard to make him fit in with his great big voice and still have some warmth behind it.
But to have a song too that's got a good tune to it, you know, I mean, that's the main thing. That all of Roy's big hits going back in the 60s and through the 60s, they were great tunes, you know, and they always had nice little bits and just great little hooks and different little bits. Like Roy always seemed to have these extra little bits to the song. The structure was always quite different to other people's tunes, and it was hard really to get a song for Roy. I think when we were writing all these tunes, I dare say if we just kept sitting there, we could have rolled out another 30 tunes in the mood we got into. But Roy was like a special case to try and, in fact, that song originally, when we wrote that, and it wasn't very good when we first wrote it, and Jeff went home and did a bit of homework on it and came back the next day and just took all the backing out and changed the chord sequence totally to what we'd written it as, and it just became really nice, you know.
had already sung a rough vocal on it. And then one night I broke in and into the studio, and one morning I just came real early before anybody else got there to try this alternative chord pattern with the same tune, because that was one particular one I just couldn't come to terms with the way it was. And I just did it as an alternative. I put this Telecaster on, playing these other chords, and pulled out all the other stuff. And everybody else arrived and heard it as this new thing with like the same tune but the different chords. And they all loved it, you know, and Roy thought it was lovely like that. So that's the only reason. I didn't really write the tune, I just changed the chords, the whole chords all the way under his voice, left his tune the same.
The job that Jeff did on Not Alone Anymore made it the exception to the Wilburys rule. Generally, there just wasn't time for that kind of reconstruction work on songs.
Oh, well, the actual recording was like 10 days or 11. You know, the main structures of the songs and most of the vocals were all laid down in... We'd arrive in the morning, well, sort of noonish, and then if anybody had a little idea for a tune, we'd all strum along with them until we came up with like a finished song. And if nobody did, everybody just strummed their own things and somebody would latch onto it. One of those sort of things. And Bob was the only one who had sort of a clear-cut tune one day when he came in and said, "What do you think of this one?" And it was almost complete. We needed to do sort of like the bridge and a chorus or something, but that was Congratulations.
Congratulations for breaking my heart. Congratulations for tearing it all apart. Congratulations, you finally did succeed. Congratulations for leaving me in need. This morning I looked out my window and found that bluebird singing, but there was no one around. At night I lay alone in my bed with the image of you going around in my head. Congratulations for bringing me down. Congratulations, now I'm sorrow bound. Congratulations, you got a good deal. Congratulations, how good you must feel. I guess I must have loved you more than I ever knew. My world is empty now 'cause it don't have you. And if I had just one more chance to win your heart again, I would do things differently, but what's the use to pretend? Congratulations for making me wait. Congratulations, now it's too late. Congratulations, you came out on top. Congratulations, you never did know when to stop. Congratulations,
It actually is mostly his lyrics on Congratulations, yeah. I think we might have threw a couple of butts.
Yeah, I think the tune on that one was, you know, we worked out the tune straight off, you know, together. But Bob basically had the idea for that.
But, you know, we all ended up really contributing I suppose like an old-fashioned group would, you know, if they'd have, like the Beatles maybe would have done, sitting around thrashing it out till you come up with a tune and then recording it. And the good thing was you'd record it. And what I loved about it was that there was no second guessing or no chance to change all the chords like I usually do, or I used to do in the bad old days. I've suddenly realised that, you know, what you first get really is usually the best thing, even though you might, at the time, you think, can't think of the tune that goes over that bit. It doesn't work properly. With the Wilburys, that was it, and you stuck with it, and the voice is already on there, and you got to learn to live with it. And by the time you've lived with it for a bit, you do actually like it, and you wouldn't change it. So the thing of having the luxury or the pain in the behind of having unlimited time to make a record, where you can say, well, let's change those chords there. You just drop in and just wallop, those chords are gone, and you put some new ones in. Still stuck with the same problem in the end. So the Wilburys was good because it was so spontaneous, and I couldn't change it. All I could do was add bits to it, you know, like me and George would finish it off at his house, because it was just acoustic guitars and bass, really, and drums and vocals. So I just added some little keyboards and extra guitars. And George played some nice slide stuff on it and other guitars. And so that's the way it sort of worked out. It was done instantly, and there was no way out. That's it, and it goes out like that.
I wandered around with nothing more than time on my hand. I was lost in the night with no sight of you. At a time it was so blue and lonely, heading for the light. Close to the edge, hanging by my fingernails. I roll and I tumble to the roses and the thorns, and I couldn't see the sun that warmed me, heading for the light. Oh, can you see that big black cloud hanging over me? And when the rain came down, I was really drowning. I didn't know unless I was alive. She's a whirling out, walking down this same highway. I don't see nothing new, but I feel a lot of change, and I get the strangest feeling as I'm heading for the light. Oh, my hands were tied to jokers and fools on either side. Oh, still I kept on till the worst had gone. Now I see the hole I was in. But she's a whirling out, walking down this same highway. I don't see nothing new, but I feel a lot of change, and I get the strangest feeling as I'm heading for the light. I see the sun ahead, I ain't never looking back. All the dreams are coming true, and nothing new. Now there's nothing in the way to stop me heading for the light. Now there's nothing in the way to stop me heading for the light. Heading for the light.
I've learned that you don't have to be, paranoid all the time, because it does work out fine in the end. And it's given me a lot more confidence as well, because to work with all these great people like Roy Orbison, George Harrison and Bob Dylan and Tom Petty, all the time, has given me a lot more perspective, and I suddenly see that, well, I ain't so bad after all,
Our classic album is The Travelling Wilburys Volume 1. The next track is Margarita.
George actually came up with the idea for it, like the main chord sequence, and we all contributed words to it. And little bits of the song were put in by other people, like I think Tom and Bob put a few of the chords in as well. But George came up with the initial idea of it.
Just the ching chinga ching. I mean, back to my roots, skiffle, really. But also, I mean, I was trying to think of, well, that's the good thing about when there's other people in the group, and I was trying to think of a song that would feel a bit like something of a Bob Dylan tune. So naturally, I got on D, the chord D. All the guitar players will know that, and you go ching chinga ching ching ching. And, and it was sort of a bit like where I started, really, with the old skiffle kind of stuff, really. And so that was that, really. And then we just, I said, here's a bit of one. And then, after half an hour, we knocked it into shape and wrote the words.
She wrote a long letter on a short piece of paper.
Margarita. Undoubtedly the most intriguing title on the album is Tweeter and the Monkey Man.
Tweeter and the Monkey Man was like really Tom Petty and Bob was sitting, well, Jeff and I were there too, but we were just sitting around in the kitchen, and he, for some reason, was talking about all this stuff which didn't make much sense to me. I think, it was that Americana kind of stuff, and we got a tape cassette and put it on, and then transcribed everything they were saying and wrote it down, and then Bob sort of changed it anyway, didn't he? We wrote it all on a bit of paper, and then he changed it. I mean, that for me was just amazing watching it, because I had very little to do with writing that tune at all, except Jeff and I remembered a bit he did that he'd forgotten, which became that chorus part. But it was just fantastic watching him do it, because he had like one take warming himself up, and then he did it for real on take 2. Because, you see, the difference was the rest of us had more time, but Bob had to go on the road, and we knew he couldn't come over and do any more vocals again, so we had to get his vocals immediately. And on take 2, he sang that Tweeter and the Monkey Man right through, and then what he did was he changed some of the lyrics. Maybe in about 4 places he changed a couple of lines and improved them, and dropped those lines in, and that's it.
Men were hard up for cash. They stayed up all night selling cocaine and hash. To an undercover cop who had a sister named Jan. For reasons unexplained, she loved the Monkey Man. Tweeter was a Boy Scout before she went to Vietnam, and found out the hard way nobody gives a damn. They knew that they'd find freedom just across the Jersey line. So they hopped into a stolen car, took Highway 99. And the walls came down all the way to hell. Never saw them when they're standing, never saw them when they fell. The undercover cop never liked the Monkey Man. Even back in childhood, he wanted to see him in the can. Jan got married at 14 to a racketeer named Bill. She made secret calls to the Monkey Man from a mansion on the hill. It was out on Thunder Road, Tweeter at the wheel. They crashed into paradise, they could hear them tires squeal. The undercover cop pulled up and said, everyone is a liar. If you don't surrender now, it's gonna go down to the wire. And the walls came down all the way to hell. Never saw them when they're standing, never saw them when they fell. An ambulance rolled up, a straight trooper close behind. Tweeter took his gun away and messed up his mind. The undercover cop was left tied up to a tree near the souvenir stand by the old abandoned factory. Next day the undercover cop was a hot in pursuit. He was taking the whole thing personal, he didn't care about the loot. Janet told him many times it was you to me who taught. In Jersey anything's legal as long as you don't get caught. And the walls came down all the way to hell. Never saw them when they're standing, never saw them when they fell. Someplace by Rahway Prison, they ran out of gas. The undercover cop had cornered him and said, oh, you didn't think that this could last. Jan jumped up out of bed, said, there's someplace I gotta go. She took a gun out of the drawer and said, it's best if you don't know. The undercover cop was found face down in a field. The Monkey Man was on the river bridge using Tweeter as a shield. Jan said to the Monkey Man, I'm not fooled by Tweeter's curl. I knew it long before he ever became a Jersey girl. And the walls came down all the way to hell. Never saw them when they're standing, never saw them when they fell. Now the town of Jersey City is quieting down again. I'm sitting in a gambling club called the Lion's Den. The TV set was blown up, every bit of it is gone. Ever since the nightly news show that the Monkey Man was on. I guess I'll go to Florida to get myself some sun. There ain't no more opportunity here, everything the Milky Man. And the walls came down all the way to hell. Never saw them when they're standing, never saw them when they fell. And the walls came down all the way to hell. Never saw them when they're standing, never saw them when they fell.
The way he writes the words down, like very tiny, like a spider's written it. You know, you can't hardly read it. And, you know, that's the amazing thing. I mean, whether people like his style of singing or not, it's just unbelievable seeing how he did it.
From the inception, whatever, you know, from the first moment he had the idea of going rambling on all these funny, you know, Tweeter and the Monkey Man words, to seeing him put his vocal on, the finished vocal, and being like producing it as well. It's quite a privilege, you know, it really is.
Did the running order fall into place as easily as the songs did?
I think anybody who does makes an album, most people would, you know, you think, well, we got a quick one, a slow one, and then we've got one that he sings, and then he sings another one, and then he may do a bit on that one, so we'll space them out and try and just make a running order that, you know, plays good, because sometimes running orders can mess up, you know, one song sound not so good following another one. But I think this was, we just wrote on a bit of paper, this looks like a good order, and then we stuck it together and it worked. I don't think we actually changed it around. We might have moved one song or something, but it was like, just did itself, really.
And the obvious song to close the album was End of the Line.
That was like probably the second song we did in one day. We did 2 songs one day, and I think that was the second one. And George started that one off, just strumming along and singing, well, it's all right. And it was great, because everybody went, wow, that's good, what is it? He said, well, I don't know, just made it up. And so we all joined in and finished it off and recorded it the same night.
Well, it's all right, riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right, if you live the life you please. Well, it's all right, doing the best you can. Well, it's all right, as long as you lend a hand. You can sit around and wait for the phone to ring, waiting for someone to tell you everything. Sit around and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Maybe a diamond ring. Well, it's all right, even if they say you're wrong. Well, it's all right, sometimes you gotta be strong. Well, it's all right, as long as you got someone to lay. Well, it's all right, every day is Judgment Day. Maybe somewhere down the road away, you'll think of me and wonder where I am these days. Maybe somewhere down the road when somebody plays Purple Haze. Well, it's all right, even when push comes to shove. Well, it's all right, if you got someone to love. Well, it's all right, everything will work out fine. Well, it's all right, we're going to the end of the line. Don't have to be ashamed of the car I drive. I'm just glad to be here, happy to be alive. And it don't matter if you're by my side, I'm satisfied. Well, it's all right, even if you're old and gray. Well, it's all right, you still got something to say. Well, it's all right, remember to live and live. Well, it's all right, the best you can do is forgive. Well, it's all right,
of the Line, the last track on the Travelling Wilburys Volume 1. The instant success of the album was overshadowed by the death of Roy Orbison barely a month after its release. Tom Petty, like the rest of the Wilburys, was deeply affected by it.
It turned out to be a curious song for the next single, you know, the end of the line. But I think you write these songs, and then it's funny how events come down, and later on when you hear the song, it can mean so much more than it did when you were writing it. But, yes, it was and still is unusual to have him gone, but I think Roy went out on top, and I'm sure he knew that. I think the last conversation I had with him was a couple of days before he died on the phone, and he was just so thrilled that the Wilburys had gone platinum, and he was just, isn't it great?
And a final word from George Harrison.
Although it's fun making your own album, it's, you know, sometimes it's boring being the one the artist, you know, in inverted commas, and I'd be very keen to go on and do another one of these, you know. I mean, I'd like to think that it's something which, whenever we get fed up being solo artists, that we could always be a Wilbury.
The series Classic Albums is devised and produced by Roger Scott and John Pidgeon. Our special thanks to George Harrison, Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty.